What is up, guys? Welcome to my new ranking of the Predator franchise. This is far from the only time I've talked about this franchise. I've ranked it previously. I've ranked it against the Alien franchise. I got a lot of different content for these two commonly crossed over set of films, but we've got two brand new Predator films that came out this year. And so now we have 7 Predator films. If you include the Alien versus Predator films, which I will do in this ranking, we've got 9 films. And I'm excited to talk about it because at one point, it looked like this franchise was heading on a direction of becoming one ugly motherfucker. But things have changed. So back in 2022, Dan Trachtenberg got brought in to do the film Prey. It was a huge resurgence for most of us for this franchise, getting back to a lot of what we loved about the original film. And then this year, we had an animated film earlier this year called Predator Killer of Killers, which was very well received. And just this past weekend, we got Predator Badlands, which is in competition for not only one of my most surprising films of the year, but one of my favorite films of the year, period. I had a blast with it. So with all that being said, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the very ugly about the Predator franchise.
Stick around.
Coming in at number 9 is Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Now, this is a film that I was probably a little bit kinder to in previous years, but I just never had the desire to rewatch this film. And one of the main reasons why is because when I attempt to rewatch it, I can't fucking see it because there's like no lights on set for the entirety of this movie. Like when people tell you that AVP Requiem is one of the darkest chapters in both of these franchises, they're not just talking about tonally, they're talking about just visually. But even beyond that very huge technical error, this is a film that is just very bleak, borderline nihilistic. Like, I'm all about gore and carnage candy and some of the nasty stuff, but this one just seems like punishingly violent, where you've got a pregnant woman whose baby is essentially eaten by aliens, and her pregnant belly gets morphed into like this nest for all of the chest bursters. There's a lot of gore in this one with little kids being killed in the woods and things. So I like the fact that the movie has edge, but it felt like an overcorrection from AVP, the original movie, because that one was PG-13. It was the first movie in either of these franchises to be PG-13, and a lot of people did not like that about it. And so it felt like when they did Requiem, they're like, okay, well, let's just go so far past where we've ever went before that nobody can bitch about it. And I think they went too far. Now, I do think that it's cool to scale down the story here. Instead of going into this big pyramid game type thing in the first film, they go to this little small podunk town in like Montana or some shit like that, Colorado, I don't remember, and have just predators and aliens descending upon the townsfolk here, almost having like a George Romero vibe about it, where it's almost like an outbreak and you're going to get, Resident Evil influences in here where they're just going to nuke the town. I thought that the design and the look of the Pred alien was great when you can actually see the fucking thing. And there's moments where you get fight sequences or kill sequences where it's entertaining. It's very bottom of the barrel type of low-hanging fruit entertainment, but it's entertaining. When you add it all up, though, it's just a film that wears its budget on its sleeve. As I said, the best parts of the movie, you can't really discern what's happening very well, so it's a very frustrating movie to watch. And it's the film that just did so poorly that they completely abandoned the AVP brand and concept after this one. I think we're heading in the direction of maybe in the future them revisiting it, but it might as well be called a movie that potentially killed a franchise. Coming in at number 8, and this is not very far above Requiem for me, and it's Shane Black's The Predator. And this is still one of the most bizarre occurrences of a film that I've ever covered in the time that I've been on YouTube. One of the most disappointing films that I've ever covered since I've been on YouTube. I'm a Shane Black fanatic. I love so many of his films where he was a writer. I've loved all of his films previous to this one where he was a director. He was actually an actor in the original film. Like when they announced he was going to be the one to bring Predator back, that felt like the stars aligning. It's like this could not have turned out better for Predator fans. He knows the franchise. He loves the franchise. He's got that sharp wit. He's great at directing. He's got that action background. This is going to be fucking awesome. And it wasn't. And honestly, to this day, I don't think any of us truly understand where this movie went wrong. Was it just a collection of very bad but ambitious ideas from Shane Black that just was never going to work? Was this a film that actually had some potential and then it was killed with the reshoots and the re-editing and becoming this cobbled mess that we saw in the theater? Is it a combination of both? I really don't know, but this thing is baffling for me. Like, I don't think that the humor in this movie is very good, which is shocking for me to say about Shane Black. The type of characters that he has in here, which should be absolute standouts to me, like this little ragtag group of psycho people. None of them really land. The whole autism angle here, where they're trying to like spin autism as like a superpower that the predators are trying to harness and like upgrade themselves with, is a very bizarre idea. Even just the surface level action sci-fi stuff of let's have a super predator that actually kills other predators. Like, is it a cool visual to see a massive predator rip the fucking skull and the spinal cord out of a predator and kind of like, turn the tables a little bit for that image that this franchise has done many times? Yeah, it's cool in that moment, but the CGI is awful. The concept of it doesn't really go anywhere interesting. You have this big third act chase with this massive spaceship, and really the editing, even with all that worked, kind of destroys the movie because this is a continuity nightmare. Things were majorly cut out of the film. There was a whole thing on like Halloween night that was cut out. There was a completely different third act with predators and tanks fighting alongside the humans that was completely cut out. And so you'll even have just basic stuff that's expositionary in the first act that never leads to anything because what it eventually led to and paid off with was cut out of the fucking movie. And even basic editing things, like having one of the main human villains of the film get killed off in a literal blink and miss moment where everybody I've ever talked to that saw this film had no idea that that character actually died until the movie just ended and they realized he never showed back up again for the last 10 minutes. So this thing, like, there's been times where this has been my bottom. It's not really, it really is kind of a ask me today, ask me tomorrow. I might have a different answer for these bottom two. This one has the ambition. This one has a very competent director. You can see everything, but it's just an absolute disaster. Coming in at number 7 is a film that seems to be very divisive among the Predator fan base, and that is Predator 2. This is the film that came out in the 90s with Danny Glover taking over kind of the lead protagonist role from somebody who is like the more traditional 80s action hero and Arnold Schwarzenegger. It takes place in Los Angeles, so you're taking the Predator out of the jungle and putting him in the concrete jungle. And what I'll say about this film is everything about that, about having the Predator in the concrete jungle, having him in a city, having him just like visually on top of skyscrapers and buildings with backdrops as a visual behind him, having him take out like Haitian gangs and things like that. All of that is awesome. All of that is a total standout here. All of that is something that we've only gotten in this movie, and I would absolutely love if we eventually got back to that in some way. And I also love Danny Glover. Danny Glover's awesome. One half of Lethal Weapon. He's great. He can carry this movie very well. He's not as much of a iconic figure in an action movie as somebody like Dutch, but he's still a very capable lead. He's got some good lines. Even ones that are callbacks to the original movie are well done. The little Easter egg tease for AVP and the ship at the end of it is pretty cool. They expand the lore a little bit by having multiple predators show up at the end of it and showing this honor where they give him the musket and, a little bit of history and lore expansion, and even expanding on how the respect and the honor code of the predators work, which is cool. The problem with the movie is that the style of it is very early 90s and in a way that just dates it immediately. Like with the way that it's basically this kind of almost TV cop type of story that just has a predator kind of running around doing things in the meantime, and having a lot of very bizarre side characters and a very bizarre tone and a look to the film that, as I said, is just something that ages immediately once you get out of like 1994. 90s nostalgia is weird. We all love how archaic and how interesting and weird the 80s looked. 90s doesn't quite have that appeal. Like early 90s just is something that is a bizarre little era there, and this movie's kind of stuck in that. And so it's always kind of a mixed experience for me. Like the idea of having a predator running around LA and fucking people up is awesome. The movie that we got it in, I think, is an incredibly mixed bag. Coming in at number 6, we have Predator Killer of Killers. And to be clear, from 6 on up, these are movies that I'm all very positive on, movies that I would give a high recommendation to. So it's really only the bottom 2. I still like Predator 2. I'm just very mixed on it. But Predator Killer of Killers is a movie that I can imagine people who love animation, and more specifically anime, will have this significantly higher on their list. And for me to say that I enjoy it despite it being very anime inspired says a lot, because I just don't vibe with that style of animation and that style of movie making. And so what's cool about this is that, ever since Prey, a lot of us fans have been like, "Oh, this is a great way to revitalize this franchise. Like, let's get the Predator in feudal Japan. Let's get the Predator in World War II. Let's get the Predator back in the Viking era." And this movie essentially gives you like shorts of all of that. You have a Predator taking on a Viking, taking on a World War I or World War II pilot, somebody taking a Predator taking on a samurai, and then those stories all kind of converge in the third act in a really cool way. So the concept of it is very cool, very entertaining. The animation is very well done. It's a very bright, vibrant, colorful film as you would want animation to do. They can do some really cool stuff, being that it is animation that would normally be extremely high budget and difficult to pull off in live action. So the movie's got a little bit more of creative freedom than we have seen in this franchise. And I do think that it sets it up where you can go in a lot of different directions. And in a certain way, it's like a proof of concept for that idea that fans have been saying. Like, let's just see the Predator in different eras and different battlefields taking on different historic warriors. Like, that's going to be awesome. You can milk that to death. As long as the movies are great, we'll watch them. So to me, it was like a proof of concept. The thing that I didn't quite love about the movie is that while you can definitely have a lot more creative freedom and a lot more you can get away with in animation, I also felt like at times they went too far. It was a bit over the top. I mean, when you have like the World War II or World War I sequence, especially, and you got dudes outside the planes and doing things that are just, they're cartoon logic. It's cartoon physics. And I think that breaks some of the continuity when this movie is clearly supposed to be within the context of all the other movies. I think they went too far with all of that. I also felt like while it's a cool proof of concept, I'm afraid that now, because they have done all of that, we're never actually going to get a full live action movie in feudal Japan or World War II or the Viking era or anything, because now we've done that before. So it's almost like we wasted the potential of what could have been some badass live action films to do a shortened version in an animated film. So I'm very like on the fence about how all that works. Eventually, they did add like a director's cut ending to this too. It was like Comic-Con, they premiered it, where eventually it showed Naru, who's the character from Prey, and then it showed Danny Glover's character, and then Dutch, which is teasing maybe some movie in the future where we're going to get some or all of these characters back together facing the Predator. I honestly do think they are trying to do that at some point, especially with the success that Badlands just had. I think that's going to be their ace in the hole, is like, okay, well, give us a nice budget here and we'll deliver a film that's going to make a few $100 million, because people really want to see Arnold Schwarzenegger back in this franchise, especially. But we'll find out. So yeah, as an animated film, it's cool. There's things that I appreciate about it. I'm also just not a big animated guy, so it's not going to be higher than a lot of the live action films for me. It's just my taste. Coming in at number 5, we have the original Alien vs. Predator, and this is a film that I've always felt was very unfairly maligned. Now, it does have its fans, and I think some people have just come around to it over time. It should have been rated R, absolutely. To me, that's the biggest issue with the film, is that they watered it down to PG-13. They tried to make it this big crowd pleaser, and it's like, these are two rated R franchises. Why are you alienating your core fan base? So, I wish it was rated R. There is certainly a more video gamey, over-the-top sense to this, just like with Freddy vs. Jason, that kind of abandons the tension and the horror and the seriousness of both of the franchises that it's bringing together. And for some people, that doesn't work, and that's fair. And you do have a collection of moments that feels like they're kind of aping off of the other films. I mean, you've got Lance Henriksen in here as a character who's Wayland Bishop or something like that, or Bishop Wayland, I can't remember his name, who is not at all tied to the previous versions of Bishop or the previous versions of Wayland that he has played. Like, it's just almost like a wink and Easter egg type thing, not an actual like expansion on the lore. So it's a little bizarre, although I love seeing Lance Henriksen here. And even some of the callbacks, like having, you ugly son of a, like moments like that where it's like, we don't have to reuse the iconic lines every single time. And they're still doing this shit with like Alien Romulus. The worst part of that movie is just having to say things from Aliens. Remember that movie? Yes, we do. Do something new. But I have a lot of fun with this movie. I think they have a really cool concept here with the pyramid, the game that the Predators are essentially using the aliens to breed things for them to train with and to kind of sharpen their skills with. I think that's a very cool concept, having humans locked in there, having the Predators kind of be for the first time in the franchise, reworked as somewhat being a hero. Like, you still kill some of the humans, but like there's a team up thing at the end of the movie with Sana Lathan and a Predator that's very cool to see, and how he kind of marks her with the alien blood and gives her that little warrior crest and stuff. Again, expanding on our understanding of the Predator and how their honor and their code works, and kind of just making it a little bit more ambiguous and complicated, that they're not just these evil monsters. Like, they're like us. They have a culture. They have this code that they live by. We're just a piece of that. So I loved all of that. I think that, despite the fact there's more CGI at play, I think the Predator and the aliens look pretty good in here for the most part. So it's a movie that I'm entertained by. It's not one that's ever going to reach the heights of like the first Predator or the first two Alien films, not even close. But for what the concept is, taking these two things, taking the two action figures and smashing them together, I think it's a fun movie. Now, the next three movies on this list, honestly, this is one of those situations where you ask me today and you'll get a different list than if you ask me tomorrow. I really enjoy all three of these Predator films for very different reasons. But as of today, number 4 for me is going to be Predators. Now, this was a movie that I was very excited about. It was essentially a script by Robert Rodriguez. I thought that he was directing it back in the day, but of course he didn't end up doing that. And it was just a really cool idea to have this hunting ground planet where we get to actually expand the different like ranks of the predators, and you have like these predator dogs and things, and it's essentially taking all the worst people, all the baddest and most mean people from Earth, throwing them on this planet and having the predator face off with them. You got a serial killer, you got a serial rapist, you got a gang member, you got a yakuza, you got a like special forces guy. It's a really cool ragtag group of characters where a lot of them are pretty morally reprehensible, and even the ones that are somewhat good guys, they're a little morally gray. So it kind of gets a little bit back to the dynamic of that first film of having just some like badass dudes versus predators now, not just one, multiple ones. And you got some great scenes, like when they use Danny Trejo's corpse as bait. I love Lawrence Fishburne's character in this as the guy who has like survived on this planet, has become like this crazy hermit. There's a lot of really cool ideas here. Now, there are some aspects of it that feel like it's never as awesome or as cool as it could have been with such a badass concept. I've never been as high on Adrian Brody being our protagonist here. It feels a little try-hard to me. Not to say that he's not a great actor and can't convey somebody who's a tough guy, because I think he can, but it feels too much like they're trying to recreate Dutch with Adrian Brody, to the point where he covers himself with mud and he's like, "Come on, kill me." Like no. There's a couple little twists and turns in the movie, a couple directions that it takes that I found to be very predictable. So, as I said, there's a better version of this movie that could have happened, but the one that we got, I still think is a very cool, very fun, entertaining, gnarly chapter that did a lot of really cool things to expand the characters and the lore. Coming in at number 3 today, we have Prey, which was the sequel that dropped in 2022 that was a Hulu film. Massive surprise. This was a movie that I think all of us expected was probably going to suck. What version of a Predator sequel is going to be awesome that's going straight to streaming? And most of us ate our words. I know there's people that don't like this film. That's fine. That's mostly fair, depending on what your issues are. But Prey is a movie to me that of all the sequels really captured the most about what worked so well in that first film, where you have this single warrior, this single protagonist that is both trying to survive as well as trying to figure out how the predator works and use its strengths against it. And eventually you get this big climactic showdown. I love the way that we have the Native Americans and these tribes, and kind of given more of like a period piece look at the predator. I love the fact that the actual predator that we get is a very different style. It has different, like more archaic versions of weapons. Still pretty unfair, but it has a different set of tools to utilize that I think fits more the time period of people that it's going against, which was a cool element. I think there's a lot of tension in the buildup, and it does a great job at kind of going through that same journey where we see that there's something there, but the characters have to figure out exactly how it works. And there's a great scene where he kind of reveals himself after he takes out a bear, and you got Naru who's like, "What the fuck is this thing?" And I even like Naru a lot as a character. That seems to be the point that people either love or hate this movie on. Some of it's just stupid internet girl boss bullshit, but that people don't buy a girl taking down a predator, whatever. Like, I can argue that all day long. For me, I think they did a great job at telling that story and building up to that point in a way that makes sense, where she is somebody that wants to be a hunter. She doesn't want a traditional, like, female role in her tribe, which is an interesting place to start for the character. And she encounters this predator multiple times and watches how he fights and takes out so many other people and sees how his weaknesses can be exploited, and essentially lures him into a trap where she's able to take everything she's learned throughout the movie and ultimately get the upper hand on him. I think that's a great journey for a character. So I really do enjoy this film. There's a little bit of a weird uncanny valley when you got Native Americans speaking English for the entire film. I know there's a Comanche cut for this film, but it's all subtitles. I kind of wish there was a version that was shot where they all talk in their native language and we can just have English subtitles. That's probably the version of the film I'd rather watch, just for the immersion's sake. There's moments where there's some CGI that certainly doesn't hold up as well as how cool the design was in the first film. But that kind of comes with the territory for modern filmmaking at this point. This is one of the better examples of it. It's not an egregious one. So I really enjoyed this film. I think it was a great return to form, and it was my favorite sequel up until very recently. Coming in at number 2, and I am just as surprised as you are to see it this high, and that is Predator Badlands. This is the brand new sequel that just came out this weekend. Is there some recency bias to this? I don't know. Honestly, I just loved this film. It was the most exciting thing that I've seen out of this franchise in a long time. And it really is the type of film that I tend to highly enjoy if it's done well. And I think they did this one very well. I didn't have high expectations for this movie. I watched the teaser when it came out. I thought, okay, interesting. We're going to be following a predator this time, and he's going to be taking the role of the guy who's the underdog, and we're going to see him take out some monsters. Like, maybe that'll be fun. I don't think I'm going to like that more than our traditional template for these movies. I would rather it stick to more the horror, the thriller route, the sci-fi monster route, but I'll give it a shot. I'm sure it'll be fun. That was my highest expectation, was I would walk out going, yeah, it's a good time, but let's not do that again. And all throughout this film, I was constantly surprised at how much this concept worked for me. Now, I did say in my review, and even though I'm putting it at number 2 here, I want to say it again. I don't want Predator movies to do this from now and forever, and this is just now our new template. I don't want Disney or Fox to learn the wrong lessons from this movie's success, which as of right now, it's the highest grossing in the franchise. That does not mean we don't need regular Predator movies anymore. That does not mean we don't need rated R, carnage-filled, horror sci-fi movies with the Predator name in it. It just means this was a fun movie that we all enjoyed and it came out at the right time, and you did a very good job with this one. And I would want to see a sequel to it. But if this turns into Terminator, where this is all we get from now and forever, and they totally abandon the tone of the first film, I'm not going to be too happy about that. But what I loved about this movie is that it really deconstructs the formula of Predator films and switches up the role, where now we're following this predator who's the runt of his clan. He's smaller, he's weaker, he doesn't seem as fit to be a warrior as the rest. And essentially, he's on an underdog journey to prove himself. He's like, all right, well, fuck all of you. I'm going to go to this planet where there's this big badass beast that you all want the head of for a trophy, but none of you have been able to do it. Most of you don't even have the balls to try. I'm going to go fuck that thing up. That's a really cool, exciting place to have as a story. And this movie is very video game inspired. And, I had heard a couple of people say that after I saw the film and was kind of looking at some other people's reactions. And then I actually saw a number of interviews from Dan Trachtenberg where he literally says this is a movie that is highly influenced by video games. So that is very cool for me. Shadow of the Colossus, God of War. I've never really played Monster Hunter, but I can see where those elements are definitely in here. Even a few other things, from just having, the way the movie is structured, where you get the Predator and he's got all his badass weapons at first, and then he loses them all and has to kind of build his library of kill tools back up, just like you would in a video game. Having the sidekick that you have the banter with, very inspired by, God of War and a few other games, and Uncharted and Last of Us. And having the big boss battles all throughout the movie, these gigantic monsters that he has to figure out a way to kill leading up to the final boss battle. I thought it was so fucking cool. I thought it was so cool to see a movie that can take some of the best inspiration from video games, bring that experience over without having any of the trappings of the vast majority of actual video game adaptations that we all think suck. So that was very cool to see. I loved Deck as a character. I think that the underdog and the arc that he goes through is very cool. Well, very traditional, but very cool to see. And him becoming this ultimate badass by the third act was very fun. There's tons of like fist pumping, like crowd pleasing moments in the third act. I enjoyed Elle Fanning as the companion. There were moments where the humor felt a little too Disney to me, but they were just moments. So that was more like, okay, you did pretty good. You pushed it a little bit too far, but for the most part, that worked for me. And I thought visually, as far as a movie that is very CGI driven, not just with the creatures and the main character, but also the world around them, I thought it was very convincing. You know, it's not Avatar level, but that was a big worry that people had with the teaser and the first trailer that I didn't check out was, oh my God, he looks terrible. And oh, no, don't do that. Don't make the Predator look shitty like you did in The Predator. And I would not say they did. I think they did a really good job with the effects in this movie. So this was one that I just thought was very exciting. It was fun. It was badass. It was thrilling. And for all of my worries that this was going to, demystify the Predator too much, that this was going to be too much of a departure, that this was going to feel watered down because of the PG-13 rating or not having human death in here, I think it was just as intense and as visceral as I would have expected a Predator movie to be. There's just green blood instead of red. It's monsters getting their skulls ripped off and spinal cords torn out instead of humans. I had a really great time with it. So totally on board for them to do a sequel and see more journey, more adventures with Deck. But I still want my traditional Predator movies as well. Hopefully that's the way that this cookie crumbles and this all plays out. And on that note, on to number one. And this is one of those rankings where the number one is just obvious. Like, you don't even need to click the video to find out what number one. It's what other rankings we have below number one is the interesting part of here. It's the original Predator. Obviously, this is one of the greatest sci-fi action horror films of all time. One of the best movies of the 80s. For Arnold Schwarzenegger being somebody who, at least for me, has a ton of huge classics that are some of my favorites of all time. This is one of my absolute favorites, like top 3 from him. And what's interesting is that this movie has so many strengths going on with the storytelling, with the design of the Predator, with the way that the actual story is kind of structured to take the power away from all these big muscle-bound 80s style heroes, that it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that never feels like an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. It feels like he's an actor playing a character in this movie, and the Predator is kind of the star of the show. So that's very interesting and unique for this film, where any other film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's the biggest, baddest piece of it, and everything else just works around that. So that's something really cool and unique. I love the fact that, John McTiernan clearly has some very strong opinions on how, macho a lot of action heroes were in the 80s, because he very much tries to take their powers away with the Predator, where their muscles are useless. And it very much puts them in a very different type of mortality than we're used to seeing in 80s films, which is a really cool subversion. And then also he goes on to do Die Hard and cast somebody like Bruce Willis and forever change how we look at action heroes. They can be just the regular guy now. They don't have to look like they're 300 pounds of straight muscle and steel. So the movie's got a lot of subversive elements to it that are fun and have stood this test of time. I love the jungle setting. I love the cast of characters that we get here. They're all like the most macho group of guys ever. Like I've said before, I think that Predator is like the manliest movie ever made. And there's a certain charm to that, especially nowadays where it feels like, masculinity is something that we have to deconstruct all the time rather than just kind of let it be what it is sometimes for fun. And of course, there's great action. There's a lot of great gore. And the slow build and introduction of the Predator is masterful, where you just see this thing. There's like this optical illusion. You see heads getting torn off. You see spines getting ripped out. You see bodies getting hung from trees. You see decapitations, and you see the 3 dots scanning people. The sound design in this is absolutely iconic, with the clicking of the Predator and with the way that the technology works, all leading to a badass, satisfying third act where it's like man versus beast, everything stripped away, mano a mano. And it's just one of the coolest ways to see an Arnold Schwarzenegger character stripped down to nothing but instincts by the third act. So this is basically a perfect film for me. One of my favorites of all time. And no matter how badass Predator Badlands is or anything else we get from this franchise, I doubt it'll ever be dethroned as my number one. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. And if you love this franchise and the Alien franchise, I did a tier list up here where I pitted the franchises against each other. So please check all that out. Like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.